I'd like to give a big welcome to everybody. Um, my name is Warren Wheelock, and I serve on the board for WVAIA. And we're very excited tonight to have our third event of the Winter Outdoor Recreation Series. As many of you know, this series is being sponsored by the Squam Lakes Association and also by WVAIA. And tonight, we're very fortunate to have two great speakers. We have John Marunowski, who's volunteer and partner coordinator, recreational specialist for Trails and Wilderness at the Forest Service. John will be talking about their use of multiple management directives, pressure on the recreational resources, current programs they have, and about partners and volunteers. And our second speaker, Katri Gurney, is the Director of Trails and Access at Squam Lakes Association. And she'll be speaking about the SLA Trail Network, recent trail building projects, impacts on trails, ecosystems, SLA volunteer trail opportunities, and probably a boatload more. I'd like to give a special thanks to Squam Lake Association, and most especially to Leanne Reynolds, who is the Director of Education, because she's really the back office to all of this and has really organized the graphics and pulled the whole thing together. So thank you. Just a few quick reminders about Zoom. If everybody knows this, I think we're all pretty literate now with Zoom. Please keep yourself on mute. You're welcome to keep your video cameras on if you like. We all like seeing each other's faces. And this meeting is being recorded. So if you came late or you want to see it at another time, or people who could not attend, you'll be getting a Zoom link after the meeting. So I don't want to take any more time. So I'd like to pass the baton over to our first speaker, John Marunowski. So John, take your time and feel free to share your screen at any moment.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Really appreciate everyone tuning in. My name is John Marunowski. I work on the White Mountain National Forest, and I work on the Pemigewasset Ranger District as a recreation specialist. And in Forest Service terms, we talk about recreation in terms of public land, people getting out on the forest, and kind of anywhere people touch the forest, whether it's by car, by foot. That's what my specialty is, dealing with anything off the road. So I work in trails and wilderness specifically, and currently acting as a volunteer coordinator on the forest. So I'll tell you about more of that later. I'm going to share my screen and see if this works. All right, can you see, am I in full slideshow mode?
That's perfect, John.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, so I wanted to start by giving everybody a little overview, and then I want to talk a little bit about the unique characteristics of the White Mountain National Forest, and then I'd like to talk about recreation in general and some of the opportunities that are on the forest and that you likely know about. But I'll start with a little overview. So the White Mountain National Forest is one of 155 national forests scattered throughout the country. The National Forest System is 193 million acres set aside for conservation, and that's the wise use of natural resources. Many people will get us confused, and I've seen in the paper people refer to us as the White Mountain National Park. But there's quite a big difference there. National forests are set aside for conservation, and national parks are set aside for preservation. So conservation is pretty much the wise use of natural resources. So that really goes into our multiple use mission. So the Forest Service is charged with the health and diversity of the nation's forests and grasslands. There are some grasslands out there, and I've actually never visited a grassland, but that falls under the National Forest System. And we're charged with a multiple use. So many of you who live in this area might see some logging going on the forest. And that's part of our multiple use mission to provide wood products for the American people. And you know, there's other things that happen more so out west in terms of rangeland conservation. So many national forests even have cattle grazing on them through permits. So, and then there's other uses such as mineral collecting and things you normally wouldn't think of when you think of maybe a national park or a national forest. But these are some of the things that go on national forest lands where we're charged with multiple use. So the White Mountain National Forest is 800,000 acres, and we're divided up into 3 ranger districts. And you could see on my slide that there's different colors. The ranger district in green is the Pemigewasset, and we sit in Campton, New Hampshire, where I am currently. And then there's the Saco Ranger District out of Conway, and then the Androscoggin Ranger District, and they have an office out of Gorham. And for the most part, we operate very similarly. There are some differences among the ranger districts, but we're all charged with the conservation of the land. And we're also supported by a supervisor's office, which is co-located in this Campton at the headquarters where I sit. So it's the Pemigewasset Ranger District and the supervisor's office. And you can think of the ranger districts as the folks kind of in charge of the operations on the ground. What's happening out on the ground? What are the projects? You know, these people are out working in the field, on the trails, along the roadways, along our recreation sites. And the supervisor's office provides more so support and coordination, because as you can imagine, one ranger district might start doing its own thing, and then, you know, it's up to the supervisor's office to bring us all together. There's also, the supervisor's office also houses many of our specialists. So many of on the National Forest, we have many projects that happen, which often go through environmental review. And those specialists are critical to providing that internal environmental review. And then those projects go out to the public to get public input. So there's a mix of oversight, coordination, and environmental review. We are governed by the forest, we call it the forest plan. So I'm going to go to my next slide.
Yeah, John, your slide isn't up at the moment. You're sharing your screen, but maybe
You see it now?
Not yet.
That's my first. Are you seeing my first slide?
No, your slide is down. Maybe.
Oh.
We're seeing your first slide.
Okay. Okay. Had you been seeing that or no?
Oh, excuse me. I'm my bad. Continue
Yes.
on.
You see the first slide.
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me.
I'm going to transition to the next one. So I was saying we're governed by the White Mountain National Forest forest plan, and you know, it's interesting to look at this map, and this is a map of all our management areas. So the National Forest is divided up into 11 different management areas, and I always bring this up because I always think, who thought it was easy to manage a national forest? You know, there's a lot going on. So each management area has its own standard and guideline as directed in the forest plan. For example, the area you see in green, that's called 2.1 land, and that's areas where we are able to do logging and timber harvest. Then there's areas like 5.1, which is wilderness. where all of those activities are not allowed, and that land is set aside for protection. And then there's areas like the Alpine Zone, which is those areas above tree line, so like on Franconia Ridge and the Presidential Range. So I just wanted to give you a little snapshot of how we manage our land and really some of the details that go into managing it. One of the things I want to talk about is what is unique to the White Mountain National Forest. When I first got here, and I worked out west in my younger days. I worked out west in a few different national parks and national forests. And when I got here, I couldn't believe the access of the forest. And I think that's one thing that is really unique to the White Mountain National Forest is I can be at, half a dozen trailheads in under a 30-minute drive. And I think that's a really unique thing to national forests, because I remember when I lived out west, you might drive 2 hours to get to a trailhead. So that's really what's different here. It's the access. The ranger district, which I work, is right in the 93 corridor. So as you can imagine, that has some influence on the landscape, and it brings lots of people. On the forest, we have 6 wilderness areas. We have 1,200 miles of hiking trails, which is insane. We have 400 miles of snowmobile trails, 160 miles of the Appalachian Trail run through the forest. And we have 23 campgrounds. And then we have 4 alpine areas, alpine ski areas. So think of Waterville Valley, think of Loon. Those are actually on national forest land operated under a special use permit. One of the very unique things also about the White Mountain National Forest is the Alpine Zone, which I was mentioning earlier. And the White Mountain National Forest has the largest alpine zone in the Northeast. And I believe we have about 9 square miles of alpine zone. And we think of that as kind of the land above the trees, where trees are less than 8 feet tall, and the growing season is super short and the conditions are very harsh. But there's also a lot of biological diversity in those areas that we're really trying to protect, and that are coming under fire right now with increased visitation. I wanted to throw this out there. If any of you have not seen The People's Forest, it's a documentary that was done probably 8 years or so ago now, and it aired on PBS, and it's just a wonderful documentary talking about the history of the White Mountain National Forest. And if you were to look out on the landscape today, you wouldn't realize what went on 100 years ago. And the White Mountain National Forest is often said that it's one of the greatest conservation comeback stories in history. The logging that went on here, the fires, the erosion, the floods, and we were fortunate that there were people lobbying, partner groups. That's another thing that makes our forest very special, is we have a variety of partner groups who are out helping advocate for public land. And it's hard to believe, but these partner groups were some of the original partners that helped found the National Forest through the Weeks Act, which was the legislation enabled at the time for the government, the federal government, to purchase private land. So I'd really encourage you to watch The People's Forest. It's a great documentary. I wanted to give a quick snapshot of some of the things that some of our partners on the Pemigewasset Ranger District and what they do. So first off, I want to talk about on the PEMI, and this is, and I've worked on the PEMI since, we call it the PEMI for short. I've worked on the Pemigewasset for, a little over 15 years. And when I first got here, there were all these groups out on the trails, doing work. And I'm like, who are these people doing work on the National Forest? And you know, we're fortunate to have all these different partner groups. And we maintain on our ranger district about 365 miles of hiking trails. The Forest Service maintains about 200 of those, and then the rest are divided up with 5 partner groups, including WVAIA and Squam Lakes Association. So I'm also charged with the management of the snowmobile trails. We have about 160 miles of snowmobile trails on our district, and those partners manage all those miles. And the National Forest really just provides a little bit of oversight. But actually, after this meeting, I'm going to a snowmobile club meeting. So we have lots of partners, and we could not carry out the mission without those partners. I'm going to show you one last slide. We are fortunate that I feel like the White Mountain National Forest is so loved. And, you know, there's so much passion, and, you know, our partners are out on the ground doing great work. And then we also have our volunteers, and, you know, our volunteers we took a break last year because of COVID, and we're looking to bring some of our volunteers back. But we truly miss them, and they're really the passion and the backbone of our organization, and we couldn't do things without them. This is a snapshot of the Trailhead Steward program. This is a program that I manage on the district, and we're charged with giving hikers information before they hit the trail, because as many of you know, a lot of people go into the backcountry unprepared, and this was a technique that we came up with to try to catch people and give them some advice before they get on the trail. You know, COVID has brought with it an increased awareness of public land, and both, I would say, for good and bad. Good in that there's more people visiting the forest, more people getting outdoors, and then the downside can be that the last slide I showed you, those above tree line areas or those fragile areas are really starting to see overuse. The trails widening, our capacity is limited. So it's a tough time for us, because as the population explodes and more people are coming to the North Country, we're charged with protecting the resource, and it's really this big balancing act to try to do that. And you know, we couldn't do it without our partners. And I just wanted to close by saying I hope that many of you are able to find time on the White Mountain National Forest. It's a wonderful landscape, and if you've been touched at all by our hiking trails, or you know, or your recreation activity, maybe you do want to think about, you know, somehow giving back, whether it's joining one of our partner groups or looking into volunteering. So that's just a plug I have. We have a great backbone with our volunteer and partners, and that's how I wanted to wrap it up. So thank you.
Yeah, thank
So
you
since
so much, John. I think before we continue with our second speaker, we have time for Q&A with John. So I'm just opening the floor. If someone has a question, just unmute yourself and ask away.
I do have a question. This is Maggie here.
Yes, go
Hi,
right ahead.
Maggie. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, John. Thank you so much for the great information. So we relocated to New Hampshire a couple of years ago, and we're already, speaking about West, able to see all the quote damage that's being done by overuse of national forest land out in Colorado, which we were working with conservation groups out there. So my question for you is, and it's a double-edged sword, to have people enjoying the outdoors. Are there Is there anything happening already with the White Mountain National Forest, and or are you in touch with other national forests across the country to look at maybe what New Hampshire could start to do sooner rather than later over the coming years in that regard?
That's a great question. We are. In fact, there's a few different efforts going on right now. One of which is there's an alternate transportation group that has started, and that has focused mainly around the area around Franconia Notch. If any of you have been around Franconia Notch on a sunny Saturday or Sunday, you know that in the past, there's been cars parked up and down the highway for miles. And this group is working together, and it's a group of stakeholders and working with the forest, working with the state park, and we're working to, they instituted a shuttle program in Franconia Notch. And, you know, we're looking at ways to make it not just for Franconia Notch, but potentially expanding that or coming up with other ideas to help parking issues, to help that capacity. So at one effort I'm involved in personally is the Franconia Ridge Working Group, and also a collection of partners and stakeholders that have gotten together to try to understand, you know, how we can best manage trails and people and still provide for an experience. Because if you ever look into recreation research, many people will say that they're not put out by crowding. Like, crowding doesn't really bother them, but to the land manager that poses challenges, because, you know, as more people hit the trails, the more impact it's going to do to the plants and to the trails and to the landscape. So yeah, there's some efforts going on, and we're going to have to look more seriously at more in the future.
Very good. Thank
I
you for
have
that.
a question.
I have a question. Yes,
Sure.
this is Ralph Loring from Boston calling in. I was surprised you didn't mention anything about your relationship with the state of New Hampshire, because I think part of it is, isn't it also partly state forest as well?
State park.
State park, yes.
Yep.
And also they have this voluntary hike safe card to try to get people acclimatized to what they need to take into the backcountry. And I was wondering if you ever wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. So there's New Hampshire Fish and Game, and they're charged with search and rescue throughout the state of New Hampshire. And you can purchase a hike safe card, which goes to offset costs for search and rescue. And I encourage everybody to do that. Fish and Game, they can use all the help they can get in terms of you know, financial resources, because they're charged with really a difficult task of getting people out of the backcountry. And part of why I started this program was to help Fish and Game with that, to hopefully limit that search and rescue impact on those programs, so that we could hopefully prevent search and rescue. This program, the Trailhead Steward program, happens at 5 busy trailheads throughout the White Mountains. And on a given year, on an average year, we contact about 30,000 people. So that one of the volunteers you see in that slide, Chris, you know, she was been part of the program for a while, and part of what we're tasked with is when we see people who might not be prepared, to try to give them some advice to maybe for next time, or give them a shorter hike, or ask them to go to their car. We can't force people to do anything, but we can give advice, and we have made a difference. You know, typically about 3,000 of those 30 will take some sort of alternate course of action. So Yeah, I appreciate your question, and the New Hampshire Fish and Game is a big partner to us, and they've really helped with search and rescue across the state.
Question.
Yes, Paul, go right ahead.
Thank you. Sort of related to the previous question, I can appreciate how the White Mountains are being loved to death. I can appreciate the budgetary challenges that that you have. What are the plans, if any? I know this has been controversial about charging people for their rescue, and B, charging for parking at the trailheads.
Great question. So New Hampshire Fish and Game, they have to make a determination whether someone is negligent when they go out and rescue them. So they have charged folks in the past. That is their call. And oftentimes they take an inventory of, how prepared is this person, what do they have in their pack, that sort of thing. So yeah, there is thought of charging people who need to be rescued. And the Hike Safe card will help offset that. And then charging for parking. So there's a couple different things going on the National Forest on federal land. We do have a Recreation Enhancement Act, which allows us to charge for parking, but then money goes back into our system, most of it, about 90% of it, which is great. So many times you'll go to a trailhead and you'll see that there's a pay station and you need to pay or buy an annual pass. The state parks haven't been able to catch up with that, unfortunately, and it has to do with their directives and what their land management plan says. And I think they're looking into that, especially in Franconia and Notch, but I just don't think they're there yet.
Well, your timing is exquisite, John, because it's exactly 6:30. How did you plan it?
I practiced.
You rocked it. Well, I think that so that we have time to hear from our second speaker, Katri, who will then take the baton from there. But a very big thank you, John. My apologies for barging in. You were doing perfectly. I'm good. So thank you again.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Many thanks.
So Katri, I think you can actually share your screen anytime you like. I think that will actually stop John's screen as well.
All right.
And John, or you can also stop sharing if you wish. And we see your presentation, Katri. Looks great.
All right. Hi, everyone. Well, thanks, John, again for that wonderful presentation. I definitely learned some things. So I'm Katri Gurney. I'm the Director of Trails and Access at the Squam Lakes Association. Today, I'm going to focus on trails management. However, as the Directors of Trails and Access, I manage a lot of different things for the Squam Lakes Association, including our 12 campsites spread between Moon Island, Bowman Island, and Chamberlain Reynolds Memorial Forest, in addition to a lot of our facilities work, so boat maintenance and all of that sort of stuff. But today I'm going to focus on our trails as that thing that connects, us and the Forest Service and the Waterville Valley group. So the agenda, I'm trying to cover a lot, so I'm going to probably skim through a whole bunch of things today. But if you have any questions at the end, I'm super happy to answer them. So I'm going to start off with an overview of, the network that we're looking at in the Squam region, then move to the impact of trails on the ecosystem, because that's why we do maintenance. So I'm really going to focus on talking about the maintenance that we do, what goes into that, and then transition that into the projects that we have, both ongoing and upcoming, and the ways that you can get involved. So here is a map of the SLA trail system. So these are all of the trails that we maintain. We have about 55 miles of trail that we maintain, but SLA doesn't really own much of the land on which our trails are on. So about 12 miles of our trails are on public land, and the rest are privately owned, whether that be family owned or conservation organizations. So you can see on this sort of diagram I have of our trails that we maintain, we've got most of our public land is all the United States Forest Service land. So you could see that at the bottom of one of John's maps is where we come in, and that's in the Sandwich Dome area. So that's that 12 miles that's on public land. But then as you come down, you can see that the Crawford Ridgepole Trail and everything in the Squam Range is largely owned by two families, Webster Land Co. and Burley LLP. Then as you move over into this little purple section, that's going to be that various landowners of Rattlesnake. Rattlesnake's really interesting because we had a ton of different landowners in that area that we're working with, in addition to the University of New Hampshire, who we partner with on the old bridle path going to West Rattlesnake, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And for those of you who aren't, that's our most popular trail and summit in the Squam region for its stunning view of Squam Lake. So we work heavily with the University of New Hampshire on that trail, but I've also worked with the Pinehurst Association, which is a neighborhood group in developing signage, in addition to the Rocky Wall Deep Haven camps, which are adjacent. But there are a lot of private landowners in that area as well that I'm not mentioning there. As you move down to the bottom of the map, you get a lot of our conservation organizations. So the Lakes Region Conservation Trust owns a lot of the land around Eagle Cliff and Red Hill. Then if we move to the little yellow section, that's the New England Forestry Foundation. So they own Whitten Woods and Chamberlain Reynolds Memorial Forest. And then the SLA, we own the land on which like about 4 miles of trail of our trails are on. So that's Moon and Bowman Island, which have trails that are all open to the public and accessible via boat. And then Belknap Woods, which you can see is towards the bottom of this map. And obviously this is a really simplified version of the landowners. There's a lot of crossover in various regions and not everyone's acknowledged, but these are the main big landowners that we have. But we maintain all the trails within these areas. As I mentioned, the map that I showed previously is a version of our 2019 trail map, which we updated at that time. We have on the map itself, we included, an update in the parking lots. All built parking lots are included on that, in addition to adding a new trail, Brooks Fisher, which I'm going to talk about on my next slide. But probably what was the most exciting thing about the map update was we added some of our smaller walking areas to it that couldn't fit on the map. So you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, you've got the back of the map, which was entirely new in the 2019 update. So that has the Rattlesnake Network, Belknap Woods, Whitten Woods, and Chamberlain Reynolds Memorial Forest all on the back as insets, in addition to a rating guide for our trails. So you can take a look at that if you're looking for, a nice easy walk for the day, or if you're looking to huff and puff up to a scenic vista, you can take a look at that to see what you're getting in store for. In addition, there are tips on, minimizing impact and, information about the Squam Lakes Association and our partners. So that's our 2019 update of the trail map. We have added some new trails recently. So the Brooks Fisher Trail was completed in 2018. It's a really spectacular trail. A lot of our trails that go up to the Crawford Ridgepole Trail, which is that long ridge trail along the Squam Range. A lot of those trails, and pretty much all the trails that go up to it, sort of shoot straight up, as New England trails tend to do. The Brooks Fisher Trail, however, was built with the idea of having a pretty gradual grade to it. So with 6% grade, usually trail builders are shooting for less than 10%. So it switchbacks up the western side of the Squam Range. So you have a nice gradual hike up to the Crawford Ridgepole Trail. And then you can see there's actually a little vista if you go about a half a mile further north of where Brooks Fisher meets the Crawford Ridgepole Trail, you get this really wonderful view of Squam. And with not too much more effort, the trail on the Crawford Ridgepole Trail is pretty easy once you get to it via Brooks Fisher. In 2020, we actually completed the Eastman Brook Trail. So this is a partner with the Squam Lakes Conservation Society, who they're our next door neighbors and we work with pretty frequently. So I worked with Pete Helm over there to flag and wrap this trail. And then I applied for a National Civilian Community Corps team. So that was a team of 18 to 24-year-olds who we trained in trail building and they built the trail in the months of September and October of 2020. It was very exciting. They were supervised by myself and then 2 of our staff members, including Leanne Reynolds and then Adele Barnes, who I believe is on this call as well. So this trail winds through some beautiful sections of forest and then meets up with Thompson Road. You walk along Thompson Road for about a quarter mile and then can link up to the Doublehead Preserve, which has this really beautiful vista. So here you can see the northern section of Squam Lake, some of those northern coves, in addition to the side of East Rattlesnake. And we've got our NCCC crew who were all in the same bubble, so they didn't need to wear masks as they're rejoicing in the fall foliage. And then finally, we have one of our in-progress trails. So this is the Whitten Wood Bike Trail. Whitten Woods is in Ashland, New Hampshire, and it was a piece of land that was purchased by the New England Forestry Foundation, I believe back in 2016, and the Squam Lakes Conservation Society holds the easement there, and then the SLA, we are the trails manager for Whitten Woods. And with the acquisition of Whitten Woods, the idea was that it would be a wonderful multi-use recreation spot for low impact recreation. So here in this map, you've got the red, the green, and the blue trails are all the hiking trails. The orange, the yellow, the pink, and the brown are the in-progress bike trail, which we started in 2020 using the National Civilian Community Corps team that came on in September and October. And you can see that we have a section that's near complete, that's in yellow. In pink, we have a section that's cleared, but we haven't done much of the groundwork, and I'll sort of get into what that means a little later. And then the brown is the section that we haven't started, but we're hoping to tackle this year. So this probably is in a trajectory to be completed in the next like 2 years, which is pretty exciting. With all of that, I realized that I just talked about the expansion of our trail networks, but I think that something that we do need to factor in is that impact that trails have, and start thinking about the trails that we have and taking care of the trails that that we're maintaining. We do annual level 1 maintenance pretty regularly on all of our trails, but they have an impact, and that's why we do maintenance. So one of the big issues that we see on trails is erosion, and so this can be cause the sediment to erode into adjacent water bodies. It minimizes the ability for there to be plant life along the trail corridor, which has a whole bunch of rippling effects. Things that cause erosion, this can be incredibly steep grade, which, as I mentioned before, we're no stranger to in the Northeast. All of our trails tend to go straight up. So finding ways to mitigate that steep grade using structures such as drainage and staircases. And then another thing that has an impact on the trails is going to be hiking off trails. So John spoke about this in his presentation. That significant use that we're getting, and especially with COVID. In the picture that you can see on the right, this is from Old Bridle Path. I can see here that people have definitely been walking around the structure instead of on the structure, and we saw a lot more of that this year than we have in previous years. My guess is that people were trying to keep that 6 feet of distance. And so unfortunately, they're walking on the side of the trail, treading down vegetation, causing further erosion and also undermining that structure. So these are things that we're all thinking of. Another impact that trails have is habitat disturbance. So hiking off trail, I already mentioned, is going to trample the vegetation, widen the corridor, minimize the area in which vegetation can grow. But also the presence of trails impacts the behavior of animals. So there's a really wonderful report that was recently published back in, I believe, either early 2020 or late 2019 called Trails for People and Wildlife, that was largely spearheaded by New Hampshire Fish and Game, but it was done in partnership with a whole bunch of groups like Audubon and the UNH Cooperative Extension. So I have this little diagram on the right, which is from the report, which shows the impact that a hiker has on either side of the trail. It extends out 400 feet at most. And so that's for your larger mammals, such as black bears. And then for birds, they generally have about 150-foot impact. And then for amphibians, about 60 foot. So just thinking about that when you're hiking, and that 400 feet is just on one side of the trail. So you extend it out, 800 feet total is the impact that the trail has, or that the hiker has, in terms of potentially impacting the behavior of animals. That can be, like not, not being able to like procreate. That can be, putting themselves in danger when there are issues with predators, all sorts of things that can interrupt how they're acting. And then finally, just that really visible like litter, pet, and human waste, which I think we all see on various trails. So with all of that, obviously we have to do something about the impacts that we have. So that brings us to that crucial maintenance, or also called level 1 maintenance. So the first 4 bullets on this, lopping, removing blowdowns, covering up social trails, and blazing the trail, are all efforts to keep people on trail. Lopping branches is going to ensure that people know where the corridor is. With blowdowns, it keeps people from skirting around and creating social trails. Blazing ensures that people know where to go. The big thing is clearing drainage, though, in order to reduce erosion. So you can see I've got this example of us clearing drainage. This is one of our long drainages on Old Bridle Path, which just takes, that drainage alone probably takes like 20 minutes to clean sufficiently. So even I can look at this, and they've got a long way to go before they're done clearing that water bar. So overall, the SLA dedicates over 1,000 hours annually to level 1 maintenance. So that's between our Lakes Region Conservation Corps crew, our trail adopters, and volunteers that go out with our Lakes Region Conservation Corps. The other work that we do is level 2 maintenance. So this is going to be more of that sort of heavy lifting work as opposed to that routine work. So this is going to be rerouting a trail or rerouting a section of trail, hardening the treadway, which I'll show an example of, and then installing or replacing all sorts of different structures. So you'll see a couple of examples of areas where this work is definitely needed. So here we have, I've recently been doing some surveying on our Old Bridle Path trail up to West Rattlesnake. Here you can see the impacts that people have. I think that the picture on the right, number 27, has a really, startling example of gullying. So you can see that the forest floor is much higher than trail on either side, and that's just from the tread of hikers along that trail. I think that, you can also see that a drainage is coming in here at the bottom right-hand corner. So there's a need for a drainage, just thinking about, the amount of time and effort that's going to be going into remedying these different issues. Here you can see this is towards the summit of West Rattlesnake, the need for retaining walls and an incredibly widened corridor. We're going to manage for different use depending on how much use an area receives. On top of the Crawford Ridgepole Trail, there are a lot of sections that are really single track, narrow trail corridors, probably about like 3 feet width, versus this Old Bridle Path, which receives probably 30,000 hikers or more every year. You can see we've got a tread that looks like it's about 12 feet wide. So looking at maybe trying to cut that back into like an 8-foot corridor by using retaining walls on either side of the trail to keep people on trail and to minimize the amount that the trail is eroding. And then finally, declining vegetation zones. This is something that John was talking about on the Franconia Ridge, which I'm sure a lot of you all are familiar with, but on Rattlesnake as well, we have these small patches of vegetation that were definitely larger at one time. So looking at establishing barriers in order to keep people off of these areas, and signage that just informs people of the impact that they're having. So here are some examples of the level 2 maintenance that the Squam Lakes Association has done in partnership with organizations over the past couple of years. So from 2017 to 2019, we had a hardening project on Old Bridle Path in partnership with the University of New Hampshire. This was a really cool program or project, partially because some of you all might remember we had people hiking up the riprap, or those larger stones, and the smaller aggregate gravel to this location. So the hikers in the summer were super excited to help with like lugging 5-gallon buckets that were like maybe a fifth full with gravel up to this spot, and just doing their part to give back to the trail. That was our 2017 to 2019 project. UNH did a lot of the groundwork of getting that in, but we frequently had SLA staff helping them when they were out there. Then you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, we're partnering with the United States Forest Service. So this was actually with the Saco station, because SLA, the trails we maintain, straddles both the Pemi and the Saco ranger stations for the Forest Service. So this was a partnership on our Wentworth Trail up to Mount Israel. So we had 2 of our AmeriCorps members working with Kristen Bailey out of the Saco station to do a reroute around a really wet section on the trail. So that was really nice to get that done. And then finally last year, we did some step replacement close to the summit with the University of New Hampshire. So our upcoming and ongoing trail projects, for level 2 maintenance, we are looking at doing some work on the Five Finger Point Trail, which is in the Rattlesnake Network. This year in 2021, we're applying for another National Civilian Community Corps program. And then if you hadn't guessed already, we're looking at doing some major work on the Old Bridle Path in 2022. So I'm currently working through the process of figuring out what exactly needs to get done, because there's a lot that needs to get done on that trail. For those of you who are familiar with it, I'm sure you can attest to that. Additionally, the Morgan and Percival Loop, which are right behind the Rattlesnake area, we're looking at doing some major work on those trails too, potentially starting in 2022, but that might get pushed off to 2023. But we really want to start focusing our efforts onto that level 2 maintenance that our trails so frequently and desperately need. We're also going to be finishing up the White Woods Bike Trail, as I mentioned, and then just some of our other projects within the trail sphere include the education and signage updates. So some of y'all, if you've been hiking in the area, you'll have noticed that we've been updating our junction signs gradually. I think Rattlesnake Network actually is the last section that's getting that update. Everywhere else, they're pretty up to date. We're updating our kiosk content. So you can see an example of that with the Cotton Mountain Trailhead. But we're planning to use that format to standardize what people see at our trailheads, getting the information of where you are, where you're going, and how to minimize impact when you're on the trail. And then something that we're looking at a little more long term is interpretive trail signs on Old Bridle Path once we're done with the work there. That's going to focus on instructing hikers on how to minimize impact when they're out on the trails. So ways to give back to the trails in the Squam region, but also in the broader trails community, because we're all sort of in this together, and the trails community is pretty close. It's really fun to work with everyone, and so I don't want to just plug SLA. I want to plug all of the trails in the area. So one way is to volunteer. SLA, we have a trail adopter program, and we're always excited to bring on new trail adopters. We have volunteer work days, which are led by our Lakes Region Conservation Corps crew. Unfortunately, they're temporarily on hiatus due to COVID-19, but hopefully those should be opening up soon. I encourage you to look at our calendar. The Squam Ridge Race, we look for volunteers for that. That happens in September. It's a 12-mile trail run, and we're hopefully planning to host it in person this year. Last year we did it virtual. So just look for updates on our website as to what format that's going to take. But other ways to support, obviously becoming a member of the SLA or of any trail group that that you want to support. We do have SLA Iron Rangers, so those are money collection devices at the Rattlesnake Trailhead and at the Chamberlain Reynolds Trailhead, and it's just by donation. We don't charge any fee for using those areas. And then supporting the Squam Ridge Race either as a racer or as a sponsor. And then finally, giving back to the trails, just, you know, minimizing your own impact. And it seems like this is a pretty trails conscientious crew, but just, you know, thinking about like staying on the trail and ensuring that you're staying on the trail. Carry in, carry out. So anything that you bring with you, take out with you, and considering helping us just by picking up the trash that you find along the trail. Then, you know, being prepared, making sure that you leave a plan with someone so they know where you are, but also have the materials that you need. Right now with COVID, what we're running into is having a backup plan is really important, because our trails are so used right now that, you know, people are getting to the trailhead and there's just nowhere to park, and they're parking on the road, which creates safety hazards. Plus it just adds to, you know, the impact that the trails are receiving. So knowing if there's an alternative hike that you can take that day, considering that the trail is pet appropriate. This is mostly for like a lot of wetland trails. Sometimes dogs can be really disruptive of the wildlife in that area. And then minimizing trail use during mud season. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. We did close our trails on Thursday. So this is the Rattlesnake Network and the Squam Range trails. There are a couple of areas that we maintain that are still open. So I encourage you to look at our website to learn which trails are currently open. The trails will remain closed for a minimum of 4 weeks, or the time that it takes for the trails to dry. So just be looking out on our website for when the trails open again. It'll likely be towards the end of April. But please stay off the trails during that time, but also you can find, you know, alternative hikes and activities during that time. And then finally, I just want to thank our partners. So this is a list of the big partners that we work with. Obviously, there are definitely some people I'm probably leaving off the list, but yeah, we couldn't do a lot of the work without these people, and you know, everybody brings wonderful ideas to the table. So it's exciting to work with all these groups. And there's my information and the resources I referenced. So the Squam Lakes Association Trail Guide, 6th edition, we do sell that in our store, which we're currently isn't open to the public, but we will mail it out. And then Trails for People and Wildlife Report, which I mentioned, and the Trails Impact, a really easy link, just wildnh.gov/trails will get you the report and a webinar about the impacts that, you know, people have on the trails and how to build sustainably surrounding that. So with that, Warren, I am done.
And I thought SLA had a modest objectives. My God, I'm thinking there's an army that's behind your organization. That's really impressive. Great presentation. I'm sure people would have some follow-up questions. So either raise your hands or go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask Katri any questions you may have.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. And thank you so much for everything the SLA does. Question about some of the conservation lands that are administered by SLA or SLCS, such as Great Island, that it's great that it's conserved, but it's not open to the public with trails, et cetera. Do you think there's any future in conserved lands that are not now open to the public becoming open to the public?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, that would be probably more of a question for the Squam Lakes Conservation Society. So I would encourage you to reach out to Pete Helm at the Conservation Society to ask that.
Well, I have a question. How much does it cost to become a member?
So the lowest membership rate is $35, but then you can go up from there, like 50 to 100, at the various levels, it'll give you different benefits.
You should put a sign up right on your your presentation. We'll get some members on board right now. I'm sure you can join through your website. Is there a web?
Yeah, if you just go to our website under join and support, you can become a member.
Katri Froman Anderson here from Waterville. Can you tell me a little bit about Whitten Woods bike paths? How many along they'll be when they're finished?
Yeah, so the plan for the trail is it's going to be about 3 miles. So about 2.5 that's a loop, and then a spur that connects from the hiking trail that's about half a mile. And the trail is going to be in the sort of beginner to intermediate, probably it's more on the intermediate side. The idea is that it can be used, both by a recreation, a skilled mountain biker just for like an evening ride, or by a beginner who's trying to up their technicality a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See, Charles Hastings has a question. Go ahead, Charles. Well, you had your hand up. Maybe any questions from anyone? Just unmute yourself. Maybe that's an easy way to do it. Thomas, Casey, I see your hand up. Just unmute yourself.
Thank you. Katri, this might be kind of a morbid question, but for my own sort of sense of scale, even though Red Hill is not part of your territory, in terms of overuse, how would you compare Red Hill and Rattlesnake?
That's a good question. Yeah, because I run Red Hill a decent amount, and obviously we have a trail network that connects to it. I think Eagle Cliff Trail up to Red Hill doesn't receive nearly as much use as the Red Hill Trail up to the fire tower. I would say they're pretty comparable, probably, when looking at the the erosion that's occurring on that trail. The one thing is, I think Rattlesnake has slightly larger parking lot. But Red Hill also doesn't have as much restriction on road parking, whereas Rattlesnake, as of 2 years ago, you can no longer park along the road. So I would say they're pretty comparable. I know the Lakes Region Conservation Trust did have trail hosts similar to what SLA has on the weekend at Old Bridle Path. So I'd be interested to touch base with them and see how many people they were counting on the weekends.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, and for people looking for alternatives, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but the new Conservation Society trails off Millbridge Road in Sandwich.
Yeah, Dot Banks Trail.
It's beautiful.
It is. It's really stunning. I also recently hiked the Red Hill River Trail over in Sandwich, and that's another really stunning trail. But both of them are we do ask that you leave your dogs at home just because of how close they are to wetlands.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I do see a question in the chat. Actually, Charles was asking where he can buy the map. I heard that the store is closed, but you said you could take orders over the phone or over the website?
Yeah, you can email us. You can email me directly at the kgurney@squamlakes.org, and I'll set it up for you, or you can email us at info@squamlakes.org, and we'll figure it out.
Another perfectly timed presentation. I hear the 7 o'clock dinner bell. Wow, I think we could keep both speakers on till, who knows, till midnight. There's so many questions to ask, and I personally thank you so much. I tend to be always hiking in my backyard, and I can't wait to explore everything that's going on and over the mountain. Mm-hmm. So I think that since we had scheduled just an hour, I'm just going to again thank everybody for participation, everybody who has joined this meeting, our presenters, Leanne, and hope that everybody has a great evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.